Okay, Vic, now it's my pleasure to bring in our very first guest, somebody who's well known to anybody who's ever even followed hockey, and that's Wayne Gretzky. Thanks, Wayne, for doing this on the Wraparound, our very first show. I couldn't have anybody any better, anybody that I have appreciated and admired more than you, that's for sure. But we're called the Wraparound, and I was saying to Vic before we came on the air, the only time I remember you getting a wraparound goal was in Vancouver back in 97 when you completed a hat trick against Mess and the Canucks. You remember that? That was your third goal. It was in the third period. And I don't know if you remember that one, but it's very clear to me.
I remember it. I remember for a few different reasons. One, we had just signed on a guy that was a traveling secretary, I guess, assistant to Neil and the team, Darren Blake. And for my whole career, my whole life, I've always had steak and potato on the day of a game. And that day after the morning skate, we went up to the team room to have our 12:30 meal. And as I got up to the counter, all I saw was salmon. And I turned around and I said, where's the steaks? And he said, everybody told me the best salmon in the world is in Vancouver. Order salmon. And I looked at him, I said, well, if you like your job, you better get me some steaks. I've never eaten salmon in my life on game day. So that was the start of the day, and he was all nervous. Of course, I was just kidding. But I was, a night I remember, I scored 3 goals, and the last one was a wraparound. And now these kids, they do all these tricks, and they practice it, and they love it. So the kids, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Zegras, these kids have so much skill and they practice it and they get excited about going and doing these things in front of fans and kids, and good for them. Good on them. I just wasn't comfortable doing it. I wasn't great at it. I'm not sure Mario loved it either. It was one of those things where we had nothing to gain and everything to lose by people saying, well, he can't shoot the puck that hard. He's not that accurate. He's not that fast. But I knew all that. So I wouldn't have been great in the skills, but good for these kids today that are doing it.
Well, you talk about kids, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you to get your impression on is obviously the greatest kid coming into the league now is Connor Bedard. And we saw him get hurt there in that New Jersey game when he came through the middle, and Brendan Smith checked him legally, but ended up breaking his jaw. And it made me think about you and watching you go into Sault Ste. Marie and then watching you go into Indianapolis and Edmonton and then on into the NHL. You weren't a huge guy. I mean, you were tall, but you weren't a heavy guy by any stretch. And, I would think that you had to do something to adapt to playing against big guys, just the same way as he's going to have to. What do you think he's got to do to adapt?
Well, first of all, let me say this about Smith. First of all, it was a legal hit. He just caught him in the right spot. I don't think by any means was he trying to hurt him, but I give him so much credit for he knew that he was going to have to fight, and he didn't back away from it. He said, I knew I had to answer the bell. He showed his teammates how tough he was, how respectful of the game he is. So my hat goes off to Smith and how he handled himself after the hit. As far as I go, my first day of training camp in Indianapolis, I walked in the locker room. I was 147 pounds. And I remember standing there, and Blaine Stoughton, as I was getting dressed, looked at me and turned to one of the guys and said, "This is our savior." I'm sure he's going to hurt in practice. But the guys treated me great. And, listen, I started playing at 6. I played against 10-year-olds. At 11, I played against 12-year-olds. 14, I played against 20-year-olds. 16, I was playing against 20-year-olds. So my point was I was never big. So all those years of playing against bigger competition and stronger players, bigger guys, I learned how to sort of protect myself. And when I was 14, I had a junior B coach, Dean Pappas. And in those days, Phil Esposito was the greatest center in hockey. And he would get, I think one year he had over 500 shots on goal. But he would get in the middle of that box on a power play, and nobody could move him because he was so big. And my coach said to me, go home and watch every game you can watch Bobby Clarke. And so I would watch Bobby Clarke, who played out of the corners more than behind the net. But I started playing behind the net in the corners because of Bobby Clarke. And the reason I did it was because of my size. I couldn't stand in the middle of a box. I would have been on my rear end. In those days, if you got in there, guys just knocked you over. And so that's how I started playing from behind the net, was basically copying Bobby Clarke.
Wayne, we hear the term generational player bandied about a lot more than when you were playing. And of course, in the post-expansion era, you've either seen or you have played against Bobby Orr, Guy Lafleur, Mario Lemieux, Eric Lindros, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid, and Austin Matthews. And what is it that, in your definition, makes a generational player? Is it stats? Is it the physique? Is it a skill set that perhaps we've never seen before?
It's a combination of everything. I mean, obviously you got to have skill and talent. When Gordie Howe retired, we all thought, oh, how's the game going to survive? And Bobby Orr retired, and then Guy Lafleur retired, and Mike Bossy retired. And then along came Mario Lemieux and Messier and Yzerman. And then when those guys were kind of done, everybody said, well, now what's going to happen? And along came Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin. And not only were they consistent every single year, and look at Sidney this year, he's having one of his best years, and he's 37, I believe. But they're consistent. And more importantly, they won championships. Both Crosby and Ovechkin have won a championship. And on top of that, they've been great for the NHL, and they've been incredibly wonderful in their communities, helping people who are less fortunate, being involved in helping kids that want to play the game of hockey. So I think it's not just what you do on the ice. It's a combination of what you do on the ice, becoming a Stanley Cup champion, and how you fit into the community. And those two guys have been incredible. And so as they get older, now all of a sudden we got Leon Draisaitl, we got Nathan MacKinnon, we got McCarr, we got Matthews, and of course Connor McDavid. And not only are these guys great players, but they're great for the league, and they're great in their communities. And let me tell you this, I never sit here and say we were better in the 80s. These kids are better than we were 40 years ago, but that's progression. 20 years from now, these kids coming in are going to be better than the guys playing today. But that's how the NHL grows, and that's how we make it bigger and better every year. I'm just very impressed by how these kids handle themselves, guys, how they play hard every single night, and how they show up to be competitive. And listen, I'm a big believer in winning the Stanley Cup is a big part of it also. And, McKinnon and McCarr have won, Sidney's won. Ovechkin's won. It would be nice to see Matthews win a Stanley Cup. It would be nice to see McDavid and Draisaitl win a Stanley Cup. That would be great for them.
Well, it's a perfect dovetail into what I wanted to ask you about next. And of course, there's the ongoing discussion about Alex Ovechkin. Will he, won't he reach your all-time mark of 894 goals? But there's another player out there whose metrics at this stage of his career are actually better. And I just marvel at the ice coverage and the diversity in goal scoring in Austin Matthews. And do you see him potentially reaching that 800 goal mark at some point?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, I remember Gordie was traveling with us when I had a chance to break his record. And I remember we were tied, and I was at dinner with my dad, and I said, in a lot of ways I feel really guilty that I'm going to break Gordie's record. And he said, you shouldn't feel that way, because he's such a classy person. He's genuinely happy for you. And then in the next breath, my dad looked at me and he said, well, you be the same class as Gordie Howe, because one day some guy's going to come along and break your record. And I remember looking at him going, oh, can I get it first? So, you know what? It's hard. It's hard to score 800 goals in the National Hockey League. But as you said, Austin's metrics, he's just been a wonderful player. And listen, it's hard to play in Toronto. He's under the microscope. It's hard for McDavid in Edmonton. I love what Pettersson and Miller are doing in Vancouver and Hughes. Those markets are hard to play in. People demand you play well every single night, and that's what Austin Matthews is doing. He shows up every game. He plays hard every night, and consequently, he's going to have a chance one day, barring injury and staying healthy. Yeah, he'll definitely have a chance.
Hey, Gretz, your old team, the team that you're probably most known for, the Edmonton Oilers, they've turned their season around. And it's been an amazing thing to watch from the beginning and that start that nobody could believe they were having to where they're playing now, which is sort of more believable because they're winning so many games. But do you think this is reality now? Is this the real Oilers, or are we somewhere in between?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. First of all, people are kind of forgetting they won 8 in a row, then lost 3 in a row, and then I think they've won 14 in a row. So there's something like 22-3 in their last 25 games. And then if you look at the team statistically, last year they were being carried completely on their power play. This year that's not the case. They're winning a lot of 2-1 games, 3-2 games. They're winning with team defense, with some structure. My brother, who works for the Oilers, told me yesterday that in the game the other night, Derek Ryan had 20 shifts and Connor McDavid had 22 shifts. And it just shows you now they're playing more as a team. To be successful in the NHL now, you got to have 4 lines. You look at Vegas and Colorado, the last 2 winners. They played 4 lines, 6D. The game is too hard. It's too fast. It's a big man's game, and you got to have. You can't play 2 guys 26 minutes a game and expect to win. And I think that's the one thing the coach brought in. He's playing 4 lines. He's really comfortable with the 6 defensemen. I think Kenny Holland made a tremendous trade in getting Ekholm from Nashville last year. He gave him some size and a little bit of toughness and meanness back there, and defensively he's really solid. The goaltender started off a little bit shaky, but it's hard when you have that first good year as a rookie, and then the next year everybody's expectations of you is so high. And for him, I think he was a little bit nervous at the beginning, and the team structure wasn't great the first 12 games. Since then, his goaltending with the team structure has been just tremendous. We don't hear any more talk about the Oilers trading to get a goaltender, and that just shows you the patience of a good general manager. He didn't panic at 2-9, which he could have. People were hollering to trade first-round picks for a goaltender, and he didn't do that. He stuck to his guns. He believed in his organization, and they've turned it around. They're a legitimate contender, not only to make the playoffs, but maybe to finish first in their division, barring Vancouver breakdown. It's going to be tough, but legitimately, the way they're playing, the sky is the limit for them, and good for them. And they're a little bit older now. They've had a couple of years of playoff experience. They've gone into Calgary and beat them in a series. They know how difficult it is to win in Colorado. They beat LA, winning in LA. So, Edmonton's legit. The problem is Vancouver's legit. Colorado's legit. Dallas is strong. And look at St. Louis. They're coming on again. And they've got tremendous grit, and they got great leadership with Braden Shen. And Binnington's proven to win a Stanley Cup. They're going to be tough, too. Every team, we said it before, all you got to do is get in. The 8 teams now are so evenly matched. LA proved that by winning Stanley Cup, finishing 8th. So all you got to do is get in.
When I wanted to ask you, a couple of years ago when Jay Woodcroft took over, they improved their defensive structure. They made the playoffs. They had a good run to the conference finals until they were swept out by the Colorado Avalanche. So this time around, there's a couple of more years of experience. And your buddy, Paul Coffey, is coaching the defense along with Chris Knobloch, the head coach. Is this sustainable to win 16 games in the playoffs once we get to the spring?
Yeah, I think, listen, the difference between this team and 2 years ago, in my estimation, it's more of a team. They're playing 4 lines. The young guys are feeling confident and comfortable being on the team now. Paul's done a really good job with his 6 defense. I think this is as good as I've ever seen Darnell Nurse play. He's simplified his game. He's moving the puck. He's not worrying about getting 15 goals. And he's become a real strong defensive force for them. So they're a legit team this time around. They're not just relying on 29 and 97. You got guys like McLeod that are playing well, Derek Ryan. And I still think there's a little bit more in the tank with Vander Kane. 2 years ago when they're in the playoffs, I thought he was their best player. And if he gets back to that sort of level, they're going to be a tough team to beat because they are playing 4 lines now, and they are more structured defensively. And their goaltender is playing with confidence now.
Great. I want to just wrap up my part of this. A little bit of a question here for you. The toughest task that you've ever had in hockey. Facing Mark Messier after after you left the Oilers, coaching the Coyotes, or adapting to your role as an analyst with TNT?
Well, the analyst thing was kind of easy because I can talk hockey all day long, and we have a great group, and Liam is such a great host, and I've never seen a guy more professional than him. It's been fun working with Anson Carter, and of course, Henrik has been tremendous. And when I did get the phone call to work with them, my boys said to me, "Dad, you got to get Paul Bissonnette hired." And I said, "Oh, okay, why?" I go, he's unreal. And so when I called them back, they said, "Nobody knows they've already hired Paul Bissonnette." But he's just really, I always say to him, he's a showman, obviously, and he's good at it. But he knows more about the game than people know and realize. He's really intelligent. He studies it. He watches a lot of video. He watches a lot of games. And it's been a pleasure. It's been, I wouldn't say it's been easy, but it's been a transition that I've loved. Playing against Mark was really difficult. I said this before. I never got comfortable ever going back and playing in Edmonton against the Oilers. The people there for 10 years treated me like their own son. And it was really hard. I never, ever got comfortable going back there. And then coaching the Coyotes was interesting. It was a challenge because in those days, we'd have a $25 million payroll in Detroit, and other teams were at $75, $80 million. So I knew we were in a different mode and a different lifetime than the other teams. So my priority and my perspective was to try to teach these kids the game, not only the game itself, but how to be professional, how to deal with the media, how to be in the community, and how to help other people. So it was not just about, okay, I'm going to have the youngest team here and let's win a Stanley Cup. That was, in some ways a little bit unrealistic, but I wanted them to learn how to be good pros. And if I could do that, it was something that I really enjoyed.
Well, Gretz, I want to thank you for coming on the show and being our first guest. And, this show is supposed to be about hockey because that's my background. And of course, Vic comes from the world of ESPN and you're from both worlds now. And that's why we wanted to throw some TV in there. But, man, this has really been fun. It's been great. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And hopefully in the future, we can talk again.
Okay, and Neil, thank you, and Vic. Good luck to you guys on your show, and it was my pleasure to be your first guest. Loved it. Thank you.